Ever wonder who first dared to say, hey, maybe kings don't rule by divine right? Or why you have a right to life, liberty, and property? Those weren't random thoughts. They were radical ideas that ignited revolutions, redefined freedom, and shaped nations like America, France, and Haiti. Get ready to have your mind blown. Coming up next on AP History Help, we're diving deep into the Enlightenment, the powerful, world-changing concepts that connect AP World, AP Euro, and APUSH like never before. Don't go anywhere. Hello, history students. Welcome back to the AP History Help podcast, your go-to guide for making sense of the past. I am your host, Wendy, and today we're diving headfirst into one of the most transformative periods in human thought, the Age of Enlightenment. This isn't just some dusty chapter in a textbook. These are the ideas that fundamentally reshaped governments, sparked revolutions, and laid the groundwork for the world that many of us live in today. Whether you're tackling AP World, AP Euro, or APUSH, the Enlightenment is a cornerstone, and by the end of this episode, you will see just how interconnected these historical narratives truly are. So take your seats, grab your virtual notebooks, and let's explore how a bunch of brilliant thinkers messed with the status quo and changed everything. A quick shout out and a thank you to those of you who voted for me in the Tampa Bay Creative Loafing Best of the Bay for Best Tutor. While I didn't win, I did finish in the top 3, so thank you so much for your support. Come on in, kids. It's time for another episode of the AP History Help podcast. Let's take your seats. Imagine a time prior to the 18th century when society operated on some pretty simple yet rigid rules. Kings ruled by divine right, meaning God picked them, so don't question it. The church held immense power, dictating not just spiritual life, but often scientific understanding and political decisions too. And the average person? Well, their role was often to just obey. But slowly, like a gentle breeze that turns into a gale, new ways of thinking started to emerge. This was spurred by the scientific revolution. We talked about this in a previous episode or two, where observation and reason began to unlock the secrets of the natural world. If people could figure out the laws of physics, why not the laws of society and government? Now, this intellectual explosion, primarily centered in Europe, became known as the Enlightenment. Think of it as an 18th century idea factory, churning out revolutionary concepts. And at its core was reason, the belief that human beings could use logic and critical thinking to solve problems and improve society rather than just relying on tradition or faith. One of the earliest heavy hitters was John Locke from England. Doesn't matter which of the courses you are in, you need to know who John Locke is. Just saying. You might remember him from discussions about natural rights. Locke argued that all people are born with inherent rights, life, liberty, and property, and that governments exist to protect those rights. Think about that. Is that the purpose of government? To protect your natural born rights? Well, he said if a government fails to protect them, or worse, abuses them, then the people have a right to change or even overthrow the government. Pretty radical stuff for a time when kings were supposed to be unquestionable. Well, then you have the French philosophers, as they were called, guys like Voltaire, who championed freedom of speech and religion. He famously did not agree with what you said, but would defend to the death your right to say it. Here's a little Easter egg for you. That is like, when people ask me what my favorite quote is, that's usually the one I use. Just saying. And Montesquieu, who proposed the idea of separation of powers within the government, dividing authority into different branches like executive, legislative, and judicial, to prevent any one part from becoming too powerful. Sound familiar? It should. And of course, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, another French thinker, came up with the concept of the social contract and popular sovereignty. He argued that legitimate political authority comes from the consent of the governed, from the general will of the people, not from kings or divine decree. Now, for our APUSH students, I hope you haven't left yet. I hope you're paying attention. Pay close attention, because these European ideas didn't stay confined to Europe. They hopped across the Atlantic and became the ideological fuel for a little event called the American Revolution. Think about the Declaration of Independence. When Thomas Jefferson wrote about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he wasn't just making it up on the spot. He was channeling John Locke's ideas of natural rights directly. The very notion that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that's pure Rousseau. And the idea of separating powers in the U.S. Constitution into 3 distinct branches, that's Montesquieu waving hello across the Atlantic and across the centuries. The colonists weren't just angry about taxes. They were deeply influenced by these Enlightenment principles. They believed that King George, his government, was violating their natural rights and that they had every right to form a new government based on the consent of the governed, designed with checks and balances to prevent tyranny. But the impact of the Enlightenment wasn't just limited to the American colonies. For our AP World students, this is where you see those ideas go truly global, sparking what historians call the Atlantic revolutions and influencing independence movements far and wide. These ideas of liberty, equality, popular sovereignty, and individual rights traveled. They inspired the French Revolution, where citizens rose up against an absolute monarchy and demanded rights for themselves. They fueled the Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave revolt in history, where enslaved people, led by figures like Toussaint Louverture, fought for their freedom and the application of Enlightenment ideals to all people, regardless of race or status. This was a profound challenge to the hypocrisy of slaveholding Enlightenment thinkers. Later, these same concepts of self-determination and national identity would echo through Latin American independence movements led by figures like Simón Bolívar, as colonies sought to break free from European colonial rule, asserting their own sovereignty or independence. The seeds of modern democracy and human rights movements worldwide were sown in the soil of the Enlightenment. Next up is our fun fact. But first, can you do me a favor? What are you listening to this podcast on? Or what are you watching it on? Whichever it is, could you hit the subscribe button? Or maybe it's called follow. Once you do that, you're going to be notified when a new episode drops, and you won't be inundated with notifications. For now, the podcast only comes out every other Monday. I am a full-time teacher, a part-time creator, a tutor, so your support would be incredibly helpful, and I would be ever so grateful. If you listen from my website, just enter your email when the little pop-up comes up, and you'll be on my mailing list. And in that case, you'll only get an email once a month. And I'm trying to load that email with super helpful resources and information. So you'll get that bonus as well. I will never put my podcast behind a paywall. So I just ask that you pay with your support, or the 10 seconds that it takes to go and smash a button on your screen and up my numbers and grow my audience. And really, Thank you. All right, time for a fun fact that brings the Enlightenment right into your headphones or your speakers. Imagine you're living in the 1700s. Information moves pretty slow. There's no internet. There's no social media. If you're a young person, how on earth do you learn about these revolutionary ideas? You're probably not reading dense philosophical tomes over breakfast. Well, one of the coolest things about the Enlightenment was the rise of the salons and the coffee houses. Forget boring lectures. Salons were informal gatherings, often hosted by influential women in their homes, where intellectuals, artists, and nobles would meet to discuss the latest ideas, read new works, and debate philosophy over tea and pastries. It was like the ultimate intellectual hangout, the OG Reddit AMA mixed with a sophisticated house party. And coffee houses, they were the bustling, smoky public spaces where anyone with a few coins could grab a cup of joe, still a relatively new and exciting drink for them. And they could engage in lively discussions about politics, science, and the news of the day. They were literal information hubs for the common person, a place where Enlightenment ideas could spread rapidly outside of universities and elite circles. So the next time you're scrolling through TikTok, by the way, follow me on there at AP History Help. The next time you're scrolling through TikTok or chatting with friends at a coffee shop, remember, you are part of a long, proud tradition of sharing ideas and debating the world, just like the Enlightenment thinkers. So what's the big takeaway from the Enlightenment? It fundamentally challenged traditional authority, kings, nobles, even the church, by emphasizing the power of individual reason and universal human rights. For AP Euro, you see the intellectual foundations, the specific philosophers, and their core ideas that blossomed across the continent. For APUSH, you witness these ideas directly applied, serving as the blueprint for a new nation and its foundational documents. For AP World, you track the global ripple effect, inspiring revolutions and independence movements that changed the political map of the entire planet. The Enlightenment ushered in an era where the idea of progress became central. The belief that society could always improve through human effort and reason. It set the stage for modern democratic thought, individual freedoms, and even the ongoing debates we have today about government's role and individual rights. Okay, history helpers, that's almost a wrap on our Enlightenment deep dive. But before we go, I've got a little bonus for you. We have talked about how these ideas from centuries ago, things like individual rights, popular sovereignty, and the separation of powers, literally built nations and sparked revolutions. But are they just relics in a textbook? Absolutely not. They are still shaping our world right now. Think about something that's constantly in the news, especially lately. Debates around free speech on social media. When an Enlightenment philosopher like Voltaire was famously misquoted by his biographer as saying, "I disapprove of what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it," he was laying down a foundational principle that societies still grapple with. Today, we're not just debating it in philosophical salons, we're debating it on platforms like Twitter, formerly or currently X, Instagram, TikTok, and others in real time. On one hand, the Enlightenment championed the idea that the free exchange of ideas is essential for progress and holding power accountable. That's why many argue for broad freedom of expression, even for views that we find unpopular or uncomfortable. It's the marketplace of ideas, right? But then we face the modern challenge. What happens when that free speech is used to spread misinformation, incite hatred, or threaten others? Where do the rights of the individual end and the responsibility to protect the collective begin? These platforms, which are effectively global public squares, are grappling with decisions that look a lot like a modern day social contract, determining the rules by which we, the governed, or the users in this case, interact and what limits, if any, are acceptable for the common good. It's a tension that would have been completely alien to Enlightenment thinkers who couldn't have conceived of instantaneous global communication. Yet, the principles they established, individual liberty versus collective order, the power of reason, and the need for a framework that governs human interaction, are precisely what we're struggling with today. So the next time you see a headline about content moderation or a debate about online censorship, remember John Locke, remember Voltaire, remember Rousseau. Their ideas aren't just history. They are the living, breathing DNA of our current dilemmas. This episode of AP History Help has explored the incredible impact of the Enlightenment. I hope you've seen how these powerful ideas connect across your AP courses and continue to influence our world. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen, and follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube to stay updated. You can also find me on Substack, where everything is still free and there are resources being posted there. Join me next time for episode 48, where we'll be diving into Unit 3 of AP Euro. Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep making history. And with that, this episode of the AP History Help podcast is now history.